They say the scariest things are the ones that don't make sense. I used to believe that, until I stood inside that house. Hey, before we dive in, if you're the kind of person who likes sleeping peacefully, maybe skip this one. But if you're like me, drawn to things that shouldn't exist, then welcome. You might not come out the same. And hey, don't forget to hit subscribe and drop a comment if you think you'd survive a night in that house. I'm genuinely curious. Now, let's begin. The call came in just past midnight. A friend of a friend. Local PD in Ridgefield, Oregon. Small town, not the kind that makes national headlines. But this wasn't a normal death. Not even close. A 32-year-old man named Brian Eldridge was found dead in his rental home. No signs of forced entry. No injuries. Just dead. Autopsy pending. But I knew that wasn't why they called me. What made it strange was this Brian was the 7th person to die in that house. All on the same day, June 6th. Different years, different ages. No connection, but always in the same room. Same position, lying on their back, eyes wide open, mouth slightly parted like they were trying to say something. The official term was sudden, unexplained death. The unofficial term, curse. I don't believe in curses, but I believe in patterns. I believe in the kind of horror that wears logic like a mask. So, I drove up. 3 hours of highway and silence. The house stood at the edge of town, half hidden behind a sagging oak. A 2-story craftsman, weather-worn, but not abandoned. It had that strange duality, lived in and forgotten all at once. The landlord was waiting for me out front. Roy Tiller, balding, sweat-soaked despite the cool morning. He wouldn't look me in the eye. "I know how it sounds," he muttered as he handed me the key. But I swear I didn't know. Not the whole thing. Some tenants, they just leave. Others, well, don't. I figured that was life. Bad luck. I didn't respond. I just walked past him and unlocked the door. The air hit me like a wet towel. Not the smell, though. It had that faint rot of neglected wood, but the pressure, as if the house itself was holding its breath. The inside was staged like any furnished rental neutral colors. Plastic-covered sofa. A kitchen too clean to have been used. But I wasn't here for design. I was here for what didn't belong. The bedroom. The room they all died in was upstairs. I took the steps slowly. Each creak felt rehearsed, like I was stepping into a memory not mine. When I opened the bedroom door, it hit me. The temperature dropped by at least 10 degrees. No breeze, no window open. Just cold. The bed was stripped bare. The mattress stained. No signs of a struggle. But I noticed something strange, a perfectly circular imprint on the wall near the headboard. Like someone had pressed a dinner plate against the paint and held it there for years. I ran my fingers over it. Smooth, too smooth. I took out my recorder. Bedroom shows no visible trauma. Mark on wall unaccounted for. No indication of cause of death visible at this time. Then something moved behind me. I turned, fast, empty hallway. Shadows clinging too long to corners. But I was alone. I always check. Always. I stepped back into the hall, scanning. No footsteps, no shifting boards, but the pressure in my chest had risen, like the air was thickening. Back downstairs. I searched the living room more carefully, lifted the rugs, checked under furniture, found nothing until I got to the fireplace. Tucked behind the andiron, wrapped in a clear plastic sleeve, was a folded piece of paper, a receipt, rental agreement, dated June 6th last year, signed by a woman named Sarah Timmons. She died the same day she moved in. Same room, same look on her face. I turned it over. On the back, scribbled in faded ink, was a single phrase, "Don't fall asleep. It remembers." I stood there, staring at the words, letting the silence press in. The clock on the wall ticked twice, then stopped. No power outage, no wind, just stopped. And in that moment, I knew. Whatever this was, it didn't just happen. It waited. And now, it was waiting for me. I stayed the night, Not because I had to, not because I wanted to prove something, but because that's how you learn what a place is hiding. You give it silence, you give it time, and you listen. I sat up in the downstairs guest room, slept with my boots on, recorder next to the pillow, firearm on the nightstand. Habit. It was quiet until 2:57 a.m. Then it began. A soft knock. Not the front door, not the back. Somewhere inside, muffled. Like knuckles against drywall. 3 taps, a pause. 3 more. I held my breath and listened. No footsteps. Just that suffocating silence after an unanswered knock. I moved slowly, flashlight in hand. The hallway was empty. The air felt wet, like a storm was about to break. Though the skies outside were clear, I reached the base of the stairs, and then it came again, 3 knocks this time from upstairs. Not loud, not urgent, more like a habit, like someone doing something they couldn't stop. I climbed the stairs, each step creaking beneath my weight. The flashlight beam trembled slightly, and I cursed myself under my breath. Fear doesn't get to me, not anymore. But this felt different. It wasn't fear of what might be. It was the sense that something had already happened, and I was catching up to it too late. The bedroom door was ajar. I pushed it open, empty. I swept the light across the room. Mattress, wall, that strange circular imprint again. Then I saw it, just for a second. A shadow, tall and narrow, standing in the far corner. It didn't move, didn't flinch. It blinked out the moment the light touched it, like it was never there. But I know what I saw. I don't imagine things. Back downstairs, I checked the recorder. Playback hissed with static, then soft whispering. Back again. Again, not mine. Not anything I've ever heard before. The voice was distorted, genderless, stretched like a tape melting in the sun. The next morning, I walked the property. It didn't take long to find something strange. In the backyard, hidden behind an overgrown hedge, was a rusted door embedded in the ground. A storm cellar, padlocked shut. It wasn't on the blueprints. I crouched down and brushed dirt from the hinges. The lock looked old, untouched in years, but there were fresh scratch marks on the handle, like someone had tried to pry it open recently. Inside my chest, something twisted. Instinct screamed this was connected. I didn't open it yet, not until I knew more. Instead, I headed into town. Local records office. Clerk named Maynard, early 60s, smelled like pipe tobacco and red vines. He remembered the house. People don't stay long, he said. We stopped listing it in the public rental brochures 5 years ago. Too many complaints. One lady swore she saw her dead husband looking at her through the upstairs mirror. Problem is, she never had a husband. I asked about the cellar. He blinked, then frowned. There's no cellar on the original plans. Not from the 40s, not even the rebuild after the fire. I froze. Fire, yeah, he said. Place went up in 71? Electrical, they said, killed the owner. House was gutted, rebuilt same year. Owner's name, Malcolm Rourke. Back at the house, I pulled up every news archive I could find. Found a photo of the original house pre-fire. The structure was different. Smaller, but the upstairs bedroom, same spot, same window. And the date of the fire, June 6th, 1971. That wasn't just the year the first death happened. It was the first death. Malcolm Rourke, found upstairs, same position as all the others. On his back, eyes wide. No burn marks, no smoke in his lungs. Cause of death unknown. That night, I opened the cellar. The air hit me like a corpse's breath, stale, sour, heavy with mildew. I descended slowly. The stairs groaned, protesting every step. My flashlight flickered, then steadied. The space was small, dirt floor, concrete walls, and in the far corner a desk, dust-covered, cracked, and on that desk, a single object. A tape recorder, old, reel-to-reel, next to it. A box labeled simply Play Me. So I did. The static screamed. Then a voice, male, shaky, on the edge of something. If you're hearing this, it's already started. I tried to stop it. God help me, I tried. The loop, it feeds on memory, on guilt. It uses us to remember itself. A pause, then whatever you do. Don't sleep in the room. Don't dream in the house. That's when it finds you. The tape cut, and behind me, I heard the door slam shut. The cellar door slammed with the force of something far stronger than wind. I spun, flashlight beam slicing through the dark. Nothing, no movement, no echo of retreating footsteps, just the creak of the old door settling back into place, as if it had never been opened at all. I climbed to the steps, gripping the rail with one hand, gun drawn in the other. When I reached the top, I pushed. The door didn't budge, locked from the outside. I checked my phone, no signal. Of course. I sat at the base of the stairs and let the silence breathe around me. This was no longer a job. It was something older, something personal. The tape still played faintly in the background, repeating the last phrase like it was stuck in a groove. Don't dream in the house. Don't dream in the house. I walked back to the desk. The tape had ejected itself, like it was finished with me. But in the corner of the desk drawer, I found something else, an old spiral-bound notebook. The first page was torn, but the name was still legible. Malcolm Rourke. I flipped through the entries. The handwriting started steady but grew erratic, unhinged by the halfway mark. Most pages were rants, fragments of paranoia, dreams, names I didn't recognize. But one entry stood out. June 5th, 1971. I thought sealing it underground would be enough. The dreams still come. It doesn't feed on flesh, it feeds on memory. On repetition, each year it wakes, and it remembers more. It makes us remember. The room is the key. That's where the anchor is. If someone finds this, destroy the circle before it completes the loop. The circle, the imprint on the wall upstairs. An anchor, a ritual. Maybe not magic, but something designed to trap whatever this was or hold it in place. And now I'd slept in the house. Now it had me. I didn't realize I'd dozed off until I woke up on the cellar floor. No memory of falling asleep. No dream I could remember. Except I wasn't alone. There was breathing. Not mine, low, rattling. Like someone exhaling through water. I stayed still. Listened. Tracked it. It was coming from the corner opposite the desk, near the shelves stacked with decayed cardboard boxes. I slowly aimed my flashlight, and there it was. Not a person. A shape, a figure, curled unnaturally, facing the wall, long limbs bent wrong, skin that shimmered between solid and shadow. It didn't turn, didn't move, just breathed. I backed away, one step at a time. It didn't follow. When I reached the cellar door again, I gave it a desperate shove. Still locked, then a click. The bolt slid free, by itself. I didn't waste time wondering why. I climbed out, slammed the door behind me, and wedged it shut with a crowbar from the shed. I didn't go back inside the house that night. I stayed in my truck. Doors locked, windows cracked just enough to breathe. I watched the upstairs bedroom window until sunrise. At exactly 3 a.m., the lights in that room came on. No one had flipped that switch. At dawn, I returned. Every trace of cold, of breath, of presence gone. But I was starting to piece it together. The house didn't kill people randomly. It waited until someone brought their memories inside. It used them, rewrote them, repeated them. I had to find out who Malcolm Rourke really was and what he did in that room in 1971, because every answer was buried in that memory loop, and I was already inside it. I returned to the upstairs bedroom at noon. Sunlight didn't make it feel safer, just more wrong. Like the light didn't belong there, like it wasn't allowed. The circular imprint on the wall was clearer now. Dust had fallen away, revealing faint grooves. Symbols, not letters. Not any language I recognized. I touched one, it was warm. I stood there for a long time, trying to remember something I hadn't lived. A flicker, the smell of burning plastic, a scream muffled behind drywall. Then the knock came again. 3 taps. I turned slowly. No one there, just the empty hall. But on the floor, something new. A notebook, not old like Malcolm's. This one was leather-bound, sleek, modern. Inside the cover, property of Kelsey Ray. If found, please return to 316 Greymount Lane. Same address, the house. The last tenant. I sat on the bed and opened it. Worse, the landlord didn't tell me anyone died here. I looked it up. There's a pattern. Same date, different year, all unexplained. Maybe I'm being paranoid. I'll keep the lights on just in case. June 3rd, I hear knocking at night. Not from outside, inside the walls. Sometimes I think I hear my mom's voice, but she's been gone for 5 years. June 4th, something watches me when I sleep. I dream of the fire. I wake up choking. The smoke isn't real, but I still smell it. It's like I'm remembering something I never lived through. June 5th. The mirror cracked on its own. The circle on the wall is glowing faintly at night. I swear I hear someone speaking through the vents. It's not English, it sounds like chanting, like it's trying to remember the words. June 6th, I'm writing this early. Before I forget, I'm going to stay up all night. If I can get through tonight, I'll leave. I'll never come back. But something tells me I already didn't make it. That was the final entry. No one ever found Kelsey's body. Just her phone on the bed. Recording. I checked the timestamp, June 6th, 2:59 a.m. The footage is shaky. The camera's pointing at the ceiling. You hear her breathing. Then, whispering low and rhythmic, something moves past the lens shadow. Or maybe smoke. Then the knocking begins. 3 slow taps, then nothing but silence, followed by Kelsey's voice. Wait, I know this. I've been here. I remember this. And then screaming. Not loud, not desperate, just endless, like it was trapped in a loop. The video ends. I sat for hours after that, going through town records again. Anything about Kelsey. She had no living family. Moved to Greymount Lane to start over. According to her rental file, one detail caught my eye. Her birthday, June 6th. Same as the fire. Same as Malcolm's death. Same as every other unexplained death in that house. I cross-referenced every tenant since 1971. They all shared one thing in common. Born on June 6th, I didn't believe in curses. Still don't, but this wasn't a curse. It was a loop, a design. The house didn't just remember. It learned, and it was getting more precise. That night, I opened the floorboards beneath the circle. The symbols were deeper than paint, carved into the house itself. Beneath them, a box, lead-lined. Burned on one side, inside, I found teeth. Human baby teeth, wrapped in ash-stained cloth. And something else, a page torn from a book. The title read, The Binding Tongue Rituals of Memory and Flesh. The margins were filled with notes in Malcolm's handwriting. It must consume the 6th to remain. If the anchor breaks, it forgets, and so do we. Memory is the trap. Flesh is just the thread. I didn't sleep that night, because I finally understood. The house doesn't kill. It remembers. And it makes us remember, whether we want to or not. The next morning, I drove straight to the leasing office listed on the rental contract. The place was barely marked. No signage, just an old converted pharmacy with a paper nameplate taped to the glass Greymount Properties, LLC. Inside, a young man at the front desk barely looked up. I asked for the property owner. He blinked slowly, then said, "No one's asked for him in a long time." I told him I wasn't asking. 10 minutes later, I was sitting in a dim office across from a man who introduced himself as James Blythe. The landlord, late 50s, cheap cologne, eyes like wet stone. He studied me for a while, then said, "You're staying at 316, aren't you?" I didn't answer. He didn't need me to. He opened a drawer and slid a thin folder across the desk. Inside photos, newspaper clippings, old coroner's reports, every tenant who died in the house, going back over 50 years. They all think it's the house, he said, a voice flat, but it's the room, the upstairs bedroom. You sleep there. It takes something. I asked him if he believed that. He looked past me and said, I don't have to believe. I inherited the property. My father told me the rules. What rules? He took a long breath. 1 tenant, every year. That's the price. I sat back. So you know, people are dying in there. I don't kill them, he said. I offer a space, that's all. It's not my job to explain what it does, or why it takes who it takes. My hands curled into fists. Why June 6th? He didn't flinch, because that's the anniversary of the first binding. The what he opened a second drawer and pulled out a black and white photo. A group of men standing in a circle inside the unfinished house. Runes chalked on the floor. One man kneeling in the center, holding something small and wrapped in cloth. Blythe pointed at the man kneeling. My grandfather. Was this some kind of cult, I asked. He nodded slowly. Not in the way people think. They weren't worshiping something. They were binding it. A memory that couldn't die. Something ancient, before English. Before this land had a name. I flipped the photo over. A date was scribbled on the back, 6/6/1911. You're telling me the house is a cage? He smiled without warmth. No, a loop. Cages break, loops endure. That's when I noticed the pattern in the clippings. Every 10 years, there was a name repeated in small print. James Blythe, as property witness, as maintenance contractor, as anonymous tipster. Why keep it going, I asked. He leaned forward. Because if it forgets, we all forget. And when it wakes again, it won't just take one. It'll take everything it's ever touched. My mouth went dry, so what? You feed it to protect yourself. He shook his head. To protect everyone. The sacrifice is small, and it remembers the kindness. I left without a word. Back in my truck, I reread Malcolm Rourke's journal. The loop doesn't just take lives, it stores them. Memories, sounds, words whispered into floorboards. And I had triggered it again by sleeping in that room. But something was different this time. The house was accelerating. The manifestations were earlier, stronger. It wasn't just remembering, it was practicing that night. I set up cameras in every room. I filled the circle upstairs with salt, not because I believed it would help, but because part of me feared it might be invited without it. At 3:00 a.m., every camera shut off simultaneously. In the black, I heard it again. 3 knocks, this time, not from the walls. From inside the room, the bedroom door creaked open on its own. And there, standing in the hallway, was Kelsey. Her eyes were black. Her skin shimmered, like heat above pavement. But her voice, Ethan, she said, it knows you now. I didn't move, couldn't speak. Come back, she whispered, backing into the room. It's time to finish what started. It can't anchor without you. Then she vanished. The room was empty, but the circle, it was glowing again. This time, the light pulsed like a heartbeat, and beneath the floorboards, I heard chanting. I didn't sleep, not because I was afraid, because I was certain something beneath that room wasn't just buried, it was sealed, fed, remembered, and it was waiting for me to understand. By dawn, I'd cleared out the bedroom. I ripped up the carpet, every inch of it, then the floorboards. Each one cracked like brittle teeth. Below them, centuries-old joists, charred at the ends. Something had burned here long before the fire in '71, and below that, I found the true floor. Concrete, poured over, packed earth. In the center, a circle, like the one above, but much older. Carved directly into stone, symbols deep enough to hold water. Blood. Around the edge, small handprints. Pressed in, children, 10, maybe 12, each one facing inward. I cracked the seal with a crowbar. It didn't give easily, not until I cut my palm open accidentally and a drop fell into the groove. The stone breathed. I felt it push against the bar like it wanted out. It lifted cleanly after that. Below a cavity no larger than a crawlspace. Inside it bones, tiny, arranged carefully in a spiral. Not random, placed. And in the very center, a jawbone. Human, still bearing 3 teeth. Wrapped in cloth as black as oil. Still damp, but what hit me hardest wasn't the sight. It was the sound, a faint whisper, echoing up from the pit. Not words, not language, but memory, laughter, screams, a mother's voice singing, a dog barking once, then silence, then the knock. 3 slow, deliberate taps from deep beneath the house. I nearly lost my nerve, but I pulled the cloth from the jawbone. On it, scrawled in faded ink, "To forget is to be free. To remember is to obey." I staggered back. My breath came out in gasps. The room spun. Then the house shook. Not violently, subtly, like something large rolling over in its sleep. The spiral of bones began to shift. One by one, they began to slide inward toward the center, toward me. I grabbed the jawbone and ran. Out of the house, down the block. I didn't stop until I reached the cemetery at the edge of town. It was empty, foggy, silent. I buried the jawbone under a headstone too weathered to read. Not because I believed it would stop the thing, but because it wanted me to keep it. It wanted to stay in the house, to wait. That night, I returned to 316 Greymount. The house was darker than I remembered. I checked the salt circles scattered, broken. The symbols on the wall now etched in soot. And the smell smoke, not just in the walls, in the air itself. Every breath filled my lungs with it. I lit a single candle, held it up to the wall where Kelsey had written her last entry, and saw something new. A message, scratched faintly behind the drywall. "If you're reading this, it remembered you." I stared at it until the candle blew out. Not from wind, from a breath that wasn't mine. The whisper came again, close to my ear. "You brought it home." That was when I heard the knock, not from the hallway, or the floor, or the walls, but from the window behind me, second-story window. I turned slowly. Outside, in the air, suspended. Malcolm, not alive, not dead, mouth open in a silent scream, his eyes locked on mine. The glass didn't break, but my reflection did. It shattered inside the window. 1,000 tiny versions of myself, twisting, warping, repeating the moment of terror like a broken loop. And behind me, in every shard, someone else was standing, watching, smiling. I left the house again, but it followed, not as a shadow, as a thought. Every knock, every reflection, every lost memory. It wasn't bound to the house anymore. It was bound to me. I packed in less than 15 minutes. Didn't even take the cameras. Left them running, pointed at the empty bedroom. Didn't matter. They'd only record what it let them record. My truck fired up on the first turn. The roads were clear. The sky too blue, too still. Like a movie set waiting for its first breath of chaos. I drove west, past the edge of town, then farther, into the nowhere stretch of Route 77. Trees. Gas stations boarded up decades ago. No cars behind me. No signs of anything ahead. And yet, I couldn't shake it. The presence, not watching. That's too mild, accompanying. In the rearview mirror, my reflection lagged. Not by much, just a blink, but enough. At the 30-mile mark, the radio crackled. No music, just static. Then, Ethan. My name, whispered in my dead father's voice. Then my mother's, then Kelsey's. Then dozens more, layered like a choir underwater. The truck stalled. I sat there, knuckles white on the wheel, refusing to look in the mirror again. And then, bang, 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 not on the window, from inside the glove box, I opened it slowly. Inside the jawbone. Wrapped again, still wet, still warm, but I'd buried it. Miles back, under stone and earth. I threw it out the window. The whispers stopped. The truck started on its own. I kept driving, didn't stop until nightfall. When I reached a cheap motel 3 towns over, room 208, second floor. Standard layout, but the door was already cracked open. Inside, the TV was on. A looping tape. Grainy footage of my room back at Greymount. Footage from tonight. And on the screen, clear as day, someone sitting on the bed, their back to the camera, rocking, not moving, not looking up until I blinked. Then they turned sharply and looked through the screen at me. It was me, but not now. Younger, from a time I couldn't quite place. And behind him, me stood every tenant that had ever died in the house, all facing the screen, all smiling. I unplugged the TV. It stayed on. I pulled the plug from the wall, yanked every wire, smashed the screen. Didn't matter. The footage kept playing across the shards of glass. The rocking, the turning, and the smile. I left the room, slept in the truck, or tried. At 3:00 a.m., the glove box opened again. Empty this time, but on the dashboard, 3 small handprints in ash, and a note, scrawled in the fogged windshield. Remember, I drove to a diner before sunrise. Needed people, noise, grease, anything to feel real. But when I ordered, the waitress just stared at me, her eyes unfocused. "Didn't you already eat?" she asked, not blinking. "I just got here." She looked past me, toward an empty booth. "That's you, isn't it?" I turned, empty. But in the salt shaker, the jawbone, staring up at me through warped glass. The lights flickered. Every radio in the building turned on at once, a chorus of whispers. In every language I didn't know. Saying the same word, anchor. I ran out, heart punching my ribs. Back in the truck, I found something else. Kelsey's necklace. The one they buried her in, wrapped around the rearview mirror. The loop wasn't geographic anymore. It had moved to me, and when I looked back at the diner, none of the people were moving. They were frozen. Each one turned toward me, eyes black, mouths open, as if mid-scream, but no sound, just a silence that crushed. That fed. I stepped on the gas, didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stop, because if I stopped, it might finally catch up. I drove until the sky peeled itself into dawn. Pulled over at a rest stop near an abandoned ranger station deep in Pine Grove County, the kind of place where GPS shutters and cell service vanishes like mist. I needed to regroup. I needed answers. So I went back to the beginning, not the house's first death, but before that, every town has its rumors. Greymount dated back to the 1800s, a settler community founded by a fringe preacher named Elias Grange. I remembered the name from one of the obits, Eli Granger, Kelsey's neighbor. Same bloodline, same curse. At the local archive, I found one brittle copy of the binding gospel. Self-published, barely legible. Rants about remembrance as sacrifice, memory as sin, death as the door to continuity. Grange didn't preach salvation. He preached immortality through repetition, through ritual, through obedience, and it all began with one house, his house, the address, 316 Greymount Avenue. I traced every death back further before 1971, before even the modern house was built. The land beneath it had seen a dozen structures rise and fall, every single one destroyed by fire. Collapse or disappearances. Each time rebuilt, and each time someone died on October 5th. Every single time I reached out to a retired sheriff from the 50s, name of Walt Henry. Took some convincing to get him to talk. He spoke in a rasp, his voice brittle as newspaper ash. That house don't kill people. People kill for it. Been that way since Elias. You're telling me someone murdered all those tenants? No, he said. I'm saying they offered themselves, or someone else did. He told me about the first known victim, Maria Dougherty, 1887, a 10-year-old girl who went missing the night after Elias Grange held his final sermon. They found her bones decades later, under the floorboards of the original structure, arranged in a spiral. At the center, her jawbone was missing. The ritual had begun with her and hadn't stopped since. I asked why the house hadn't been condemned. Burned. Erased. He looked at me like I was a fool. Because people need to forget. That's the real curse. Forgetting gives it power. Remembrance wakes it up. He leaned in. Why do you think it picked you? I didn't have an answer, but I had a theory. It needed someone outside the loop, someone who didn't belong, someone who could remember what others were forced to forget. Me, a stranger, a survivor, a witness, and now a participant. That night, I returned to Greymount one last time. Not through the front door. I broke into the church Elias Grange once used. Now, a gutted library. Closed for renovation. In the basement, beneath the plaster and dust. I found the original sermon pulpit, scratched into its wood. Memory is the door, and behind it a hatch. Inside a small room, stone-lined, dry as bone, and on the far wall, 12 jawbones, mounted in a perfect circle, each wrapped in black cloth, each with a name scrawled on a tag. All victims from 316 Greymount, all except one. The center space empty. No tag, just an old mirror, shattered, facing the wall. I turned it over. In the fractured surface, I saw myself. Behind me, Kelsey. Behind her, Malcolm. Behind him, every victim I'd come to know. And in the center, Elias Grange, still smiling, still alive. Not in flesh, but in every act of obedience. I reached out and touched the mirror. It burned. My skin blistered where it met the glass. And in my mind, I heard a voice, not words, but the feeling of them. When you forget, I feed. When you remember, I wake. The house wasn't haunted. It was hungry, fed not by fear but by cycles, deaths that reset the clock, memories that restarted the curse. And I was next, not to die but to remember. And through me, so would others. I drove straight to 316 Greymount. This time I didn't knock, didn't hesitate. I kicked the door in. The air inside was thicker than before, like syrup, or blood just before it clots. Dust clung to my face like cobwebs soaked in oil. Every sound I made echoed a second too long. But the house felt alert, not angry, expectant. It knew I understood now. It wanted me to see it fully, room by room. I walked through, flashlight in one hand, the mirror shard in the other. The walls bled symbols I hadn't seen before, layered under the paint. Written in chalk that only showed when the light hit just right. Phrases in Latin, Aramaic, some that didn't belong to any language I knew. All variations of one idea. Memory is worship. I reached the bedroom, the one that changed depending on who lived there. For me, it now looked exactly like my bunk from the desert down to the bullet-pocked wall I'd never spoken about to anyone. Then the floorboards creaked behind me. Not random this time. Purposeful. I turned. Kelsey stood there, at least. The version of her that lived in memory, long hair, freckles, that faded Detroit Tigers hoodie she loved. But her eyes weren't hers. They were Elias Grange's, black, reflective, infinite. She spoke in his voice. You've brought the mirror. I raised it. You've stolen too many lives. He laughed. I preserve them. The world forgets. I remember. Isn't that what you wanted? My blood froze. Because that's what I had wanted. After the war, after my squad, to make sure anyone remembered what had happened. Even if it was awful. Even if it hurt, it's not the remembering that kills, Elias said, walking toward me in her skin. It's the way you try to forget. He pointed at the mirror. You want it to end, lace the final bone. Complete the circle. I looked down. The mirror had fused to my palm, burned in, flesh and glass. And then I heard the knocking. 3 short raps behind the wall, then 3 more. The exact rhythm from every case. I kicked at the baseboard. Behind it, another small crawl space. A cavity filled with dust and something else. A jawbone, dry, old. Mine, no. His, the original. The one that started it all. I took it and walked back to the pulpit chamber. The room beneath the old church. The mirror still there. The bones still watching. 1 slot remained. I slid the jawbone in, and the house shuddered. A sound like a sigh passed through every room, every pipe, every brick. A low, long exhale of centuries. The lights in my head flickered, and I was somewhere else, standing in the living room, but not in the present. The furniture was antique, the lighting gaslit. Elias Grange sat in a high-backed chair, writing something into a thick black book. He looked up, smiled. "You were always the last one." I couldn't move, couldn't speak. He stood, walked to me, and placed a hand on my chest. "You broke the pattern, Ethan, and in doing so, you've become part of it." He pushed, I fell backward, through the floor, through memory, through every death that ever occurred in that house. I felt them. Kelsey, Malcolm, Maria Doherty, the man who burned, the woman who choked on teeth, all of them inside me now. I gasped awake on the church floor, alone but different. The mirror was gone. The bones, dust, the curse, silenced, at least for now. Outside, the house looked normal, dead quiet, for rent, again. And I knew someone else would walk through that door someday. But maybe, just maybe, they'd find what I left behind. My notes, my warnings, my memory, a chance to remember before it's too late. I left Greymount that night with nothing but the clothes on my back and the notebook I'd filled with the names of the dead. The mirror's burn never healed. It left a mark, faint, silver, spider-veined across my palm. Sometimes it pulses when I'm near old places, forgotten places, places with long shadows and no windows. I tried to move on, went to therapy, poured whiskey into the cracks, slept with the lights on. Didn't help. The memories weren't just mine anymore. They'd nested inside me. Sometimes I wake up and see Kelsey at the foot of my bed, humming that song again. Not the real her, just the echo of what the house made her into. Other times, I hear the knocks, in threes, always in threes. One night I followed them, walked straight into the woods behind my cabin. No flashlight, just instinct, just invitation, and there it was again. The house, not in Greymount, not on any map, but standing among the trees like it had grown from the soil itself. I didn't go inside, I just watched. Windows flickered with memories. A girl brushing her hair, a man whispering into a closet, a child pointing to something just out of frame. And then I saw myself, standing at the window watching me. I turned and walked away. That's when I knew the truth. I didn't end the curse, I just changed its shape. It's no longer bound to Greymount. It's bound to me because I remembered too well, because I understood that's the price of breaking the cycle. You carry it. You become the new anchor. And now I wait. Wait for someone else to see what I've seen, to ask the questions I asked, to follow the trail, to remember, and maybe, just maybe, if they do, they'll carry it from me. Until then, I keep writing, keep recording, keep warning, because memory is a door, and I've already walked through it. If you made it this far, maybe it remembers you now too. So sleep well, try not to listen for the knocking. And hey, if you're still breathing, why not hit that subscribe button? You'll need the next story. Trust me, see you in the next Twisted Mystery.